Hello and welcome to a rather snowy but beautifully sunny January day here in equally beautiful Nova Scotia. As I said, rather snowy out there. We had 25 centimetres a couple of days ago. Curtailed any sort of major work I wanted to do in the garden over the next few weeks. But it was good fun sledding with my boy and my wife Sarah over the weekend, so that was good fun, as you can see. But back to business. It might be January, but us gardeners now are starting to think about sowing seeds ready for the new season. And while it might be a bit early for most of the seeds that we're looking to sow in the veg garden, there are certain seeds we need to be thinking about in the next few weeks. Tomatoes and peppers, especially your hot peppers that need a really long season to get themselves going. And perennial flowers, for instance, especially ones if you want them to flower this year, you need to get them going right now really. And as you can see my little photograph there, I've got some Shasta daisies and some other little, can't remember exactly, some cone flowers there that I've already got popping up, and it's got me excited about seed sowing. So I thought I would give you a few tips on sowing seeds and how to make sure that you really make the most of sowing seeds, because sowing seeds, while it's not that difficult, can sometimes be a bit tricky, but it is so rewarding, and it will cut down your gardening costs massively. You know, when the spring comes around and tomato plants etc. are out there in the shops, they are $2, $3, £2 or £3 at a time. Whereas you could buy a packet of seeds for a couple of bucks, a couple of quid, and have 100 seeds in there, and you know, and all that's going to cost you is a bit of compost and a bit of time, and you've got masses of tomato plants etc. that you can have. So seed sowing is definitely worthwhile, and it's not that difficult to do. So here are a few of my tips to help you make the most out of your seed sowing this year. So number one is make sure your seeds are in date. Things like onions, parsnips etc. may actually only last 1 year. So you know, you buy that packet that season, it will only really be good for that particular season. So that's on the bottom end, but things like tomatoes, broccoli, kale etc., they'll last up to 5 years, and there's a range, you know, of different plants that have different sell-by dates, for want of a better phrase, and I think I've got it up on the screen there. And like I said, parsnips, onions etc. may only be a year, but it pays to sort of while not being exact, it pays to take notice of that. And a good way of making sure that you know that your seed's in date is when you actually buy them, write the date that you bought them, the month and the year that you bought the seeds on the actual packet, and then you'll know next year it comes around, oh yeah, I've still got these onion seeds left, probably not going to go. So that's my tip number one. Make sure your seeds are in date and write the date on the packet when you buy them. Mrs. F is off taking Ethan to get his hair cut, so I'm taking the chance while she's out to sneak in and clean some of my trays. And one of the simplest, easiest ways to ensure seed starting success is by simply cleaning your trays. Now, they don't have to be clinically operating room clean, but a good wash out with hot soapy water will get rid of any diseases hanging about in the corners, or you know, any soil with sort of some fungal diseases possibly lurking in there, or even any pests that could be hiding their eggs in and around the pots themselves. Just give them a good clean off, and that will make all the difference. Now, don't tell Mrs. F. See if I can get this done before she gets back. So you've got your seeds, you've cleaned your trays etc. Now we want to think about soil and what sort of soil you're going to use to grow your seeds in, and it's very important the type of soil you use for your seeds, and it's going to make a big difference in whether you have a good sowing of seeds and you know, more seedlings come up than less. So you don't want to use any old soil, compost, etc. Now you can obviously buy proprietary proper soil mixes from your garden centre, etc., and they're specifically formulated for growing seeds. But if you want to make your own, it's not that difficult. So what do you need? Well, you don't want to obviously use soil straight from the ground. That will often be, you know, rocky and have weeds in it, etc. And it will be too hard to actually allow your seeds to grow properly. And the same thing is, you don't want to just get soil compost straight from your compost bin, because that'll have all bits in it and it could have pathogens in it, etc. Your seeds like a light, airy sort of mix. Now I use normally a mix, as you can see there, of beautifully sieved leaf mould. This is a couple of years old, this leaf mould, and it's lovely and sort of airy and light. And I often use a mix of that and sieved compost straight from the you know, the compostarium. And also, if you want to lighten it up a bit more, you can use a bit of this perlite, which you can buy from the garden centre. And the perlite adds a bit of aeration and drainage to any sort of mix you have, and that will be a really good mix to allow your seeds to get themselves going straight away without too much effort. And the other thing is, seeds don't need a lot of feeding first up as soon as to get themselves going. For the first couple of weeks, they've got all they need, and things like leaf mould doesn't have actually that much nutrition in it, but it's all it needs. Seeds really need are light and water to get themselves going for the first couple of weeks. And then once you see the first true leaves, so those, when the seeds come out of the actual when the seedlings come out of the actual seed to start with, they have that first pair of their sort of baby leaves, and then after that the first set of true leaves come out, and they will be sort of shaped like the leaves to come on the plant. And once those sort of leaves come out, then you know that your plant really needs a bit more of a feed, and you can start feeding, etc. But to start with, like I said, the soil that you need just needs to be light and airy, and as clean as possible, for want of a better word. So there we are. I'm using my rotisserie chicken tray here, trying to be as green as possible and reuse old stuff. So, excuse me, there's all sorts of greenness in there. So I've got this mix in there. You've got the right soil. Next, what we want to do is, I don't want to sow straight into this. What I want to do is, I want to wet it and damp it down first, the soil, so that I don't have to water the actual seeds after I've actually I've sown them straight away, because then you can wash them away and they can all end up in one corner, etc. So what we're going to do, this might be a bit frozen. That's okay. So what I'd normally do is water this about half an hour in advance, or something like you know, just a few minutes in advance. Give it a good soaking so that it's nice and damp. And then what I'll normally do is just give it a light tamping down with a little block of wood. Not too firm, just to make sure the soil is nice and firm and it won't sort of move around once the plant starts going. I'm just going to put a bit more in here. So just imagine I've wet that again. Right, I'm not going to plant any veg today. I've got some impatiens that that need to be planted at this time of year. So my next tip is don't over sow the seeds. If you put too many in straight away, number one, you need to make sure that you've got all of the a load more pots. When you have to pot them up later on, you'll have to have lots and lots of pots. Otherwise, you'll just end up wasting the seedlings. And also, they'll all be struggling together to try and get some water and light in this small little area, which you don't want. And then also, if you actually went from sowing all of these seeds, you oversowed it, and then you had loads of pots and you had loads of plants, and then you planted about, you'd end up with all of your harvest, or picking your lettuce or all your tomatoes, whatever it is, all at the same time. You'll end up with a glut of fruit, veg, etc., all at one time, and you end up throwing half of it away or giving it away, which is no bad thing. But don't oversow it, and then in a couple of weeks' time, just sow some more, and then a couple of weeks' time, if you want to, sow some more. So then your plants will be ready at different times going through the sort of season, and you'll have a nice steady flow of plants. And also, it won't put too much pressure on making you have to pot everything up all at one time. So you'll have different things at different stages throughout the season. So don't oversow them. Here's another tip. Don't sow stuff now. Like I said, even if you're, depending where you are in the northern hemisphere, even in the UK, you don't need to be planting your seeds right now. Because what you were going to do, let's go back to actually some other conditions that you need. So like I said, seeds need water and light. So light. At this time of year, and they also need heat to germinate. So when you're sowing the seeds, like I'm going to do now, so let's sow these seeds. I'm getting a bit out of sync here, so let me just sow these seeds. Now, you can either create some nice little drills, and then at least you know that what seeds are coming up are likely to be your seeds and not weed seeds, or you can just sort of scatter them around. What I do here is just make a couple of shallow drills, because these don't need to be planted particularly deeply, and it normally says on the packet how deep your seeds need to be. So there's not many in here, so I want to be careful. I'm going to plant these very carefully. So like I said, spacing these out nicely. Well, I'll come back to you in a minute when I've done these. So I've sowed these nice and thinly. And all I'm going to do with these particular seeds, and for most of your veg seeds, you can, for your light things like lettuce and stuff like that, this is all it needs, is a little sprinkling of soil over the top. And then what I'll do again is just give you that a light firming down. Now, for bigger seeds like peas and beans, etc., obviously you're going to have a bigger pot and you're going to poke them down that little bit further. It's normally sort of 3 times the size of the seed is how deep you're going to plant them. But you know, that's different different seeds, different depths, and it will say on the packet. But a couple of things, right? So we're now ready to be actually putting our seeds somewhere to actually germinate. And I've got them in a nice little greenhouse, and what that will do, to start with, that will create a nice little microclimate around there, and keep it nice and moist in there. So like I said, seeds need warmth to germinate. Normally a bit of bottom heat, but somewhere nice and warm. I stick mine literally in my downstairs room where the fire is, on the windowsill, and it's nice and warm in there, and after a few days time, however long, they normally germinate nicely. Once enough seeds have germinated in that area, it doesn't actually get that much direct sun or anything. I move them out of there into another area. Could be a greenhouse. In my case, it's the playroom, where it's got a nice set of French doors, and the wind and the sun streams in, and that's nice and light in there. So I've got some good areas there. If you've got grow lights, they're obviously excellent for doing that. And that's the thing. If you're planting this early for a range of different plants, which you don't really need to do, then you've got to support them with light for a long time indoors, because you know, here in Nova Scotia, North America, etc., up in Scotland and up in the north of Europe, January, we're still in the winter, and there's going to be a lot of snow or frost, etc., etc. To make sure, so you're going to have to make sure that your plants are inside for a long time. So only sow what you need to sow. There's my tip. Next tip: only sow what you really need to sow at this time of year, and make sure that you have a good area where it's nice and light, that you can grow on your plants until sort of the last frost dates, or at least towards the last frost dates, and then you can start putting them in a cold frame to start hardening them off, as long as the actual frost doesn't get on them, and you can cover them a bit when it gets a bit colder. But really, there's only a couple of things in the next, probably in 2 weeks' time here in Nova Scotia, I'm going to be sowing tomatoes, etc. Now I could be sowing them now, but like I said, I've got to support them longer, so there's no point. Don't try and get too much ahead of the game than it says on the seed packet, because you'll only end in failure. So, watering. Like I said, the other thing that seeds need is water, and seedlings need water. Now, like I said, if you're watering from the top, there's a chance that you'll end up washing your seeds away. So it's normally a good idea to maybe sit this, for me, to sit this into a tray that has not got any holes in it, and then I can put the water in the bottom, and then the actual tray, the water will go from underneath, and then the compost will suck the water up, and the water will get straight to the where it's needed. Okay? Your compost doesn't need to be really wet. Doesn't want to be really wet. Just nice and moist. Like I said, I've given it a good watering now, and that'll do for quite a few days. I've just got to monitor it to make sure that if the surface is dried out, then put your finger in a little bit just to make sure it's not dry underneath. But keeping it covered like this will keep it moist inside there as well. So keep your plants, best to water them from underneath, and that often prevents one of those diseases that seedlings get, damping off, where some sort of infection gets in, and they stop growing and get really thin underneath, and then over they go, timber. So watering them underneath is going to help them a lot better. Another tip: don't forget to mark your seeds to make sure you know. Now you might think, yeah, I'll remember what they are, but in a few days' time, or in a few weeks' time, when you're starting to do lots of different seedlings, you'll forget what were they? Impatiens are, and you'll end up putting your impatiens where your tomatoes are supposed to be, and tomatoes in your hanging basket, which you don't really want. So don't forget to mark them up. And I'm using some old, what is this, an old yoghurt pot. Again, in my sort of drive to reuse the plastic, just cut the yoghurt pot bits up, and I've got a nice little seed marker. So there we go. There's 5 or 6 basic steps just to make sure that you really maximise on the really rewarding process of seed starting plants from your own seeds. It's cheap, like I said, it's rewarding. You're taking something from that tiny little, that's the whole optimistic gardener there, in that one little thing. You take that one little seed and you're going to take that all the way through the summer to whether it be a beautiful flower or some lovely tomatoes, juicy tomatoes to go in your salad. Got that optimism. I'm going to go from there to there, and it's such a rewarding pastime. Make sure your seeds are in date. Make sure your trays are nice and clean. Make sure you're using the right compost. Make sure your seedlings get lots of light and enough water. Take those tips all the way through and you will have a lot more success in your seed starting. Job's a good one.